Art, I wish I could turn around this computer to show you the audience, but there's like 80 million wires attached to this.
Well, how many people are out there? Five, six?
Everybody cheer! 6. Hello and welcome to Design Chat, the best live design discussion on the internet. Applause. I'm your host, Ryan McGovern. This is AIGA Chicago's Design Week. I am very excited to be here. Really, I'm excited for a number of reasons. One, because I think we're sort of on the cusp of using a lot of these new technologies, and we're some of the first people to do these experiences. So applaud yourself for coming in and being, come on, give me a little bit for showing up and being part of this experience. Art, you're our cheerleader for tonight. Where's your pom-poms?
It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it.
So Design Chat, raise your hands if you have been present for a live Design Chat before. Okay, good. We got some newcomers. So every week we get together and bring you some of the coolest people in the design community, and it's on this online forum. We don't usually have a live audience, so this is a first for us doing this. It's kind of exciting. But what this means is every week you have an opportunity to go one-on-one and chat with somebody who's really interesting in the design community and ask them questions. Come on, you're interesting. So is your beard. We'll get to that. So take that opportunity because we do this every week and we're not stopping. There's no signs of stopping whatsoever. So, Art, golf clap. Thank you so much for coming out and being part of
for me.
AIGA Design Week. We are very honored to have you with us doing this. Usually how we kick it off for people who, God forbid, are not familiar with who you are, what you do, why don't you give us a little brief history about who you are, what you do, and why you do it? In five words or less.
Gee whiz. I can't do that. I think 5 hours or less is my usual standard. I'm a graphic designer. I design graphics. I bet you wish you could, huh? Yeah. That's it. I'm a graphic designer. That sums it up. I used to be a person, but now I'm a graphic designer.
So tell us a little bit about your beginnings. How did you get into it? What were you doing as a kid? When you were 10 years old?
My humble origins. Well,
yeah.
I wanted to be an archaeologist, believe it or not. I actually studied to be an archaeologist. And then I started going to higher education and bounced one major to another. I ended up having to fight my way through school because at the time graphic design was considered crap. And I was being taught in an art department. And the design department and the art department were at war, and I couldn't even declare a major until my last quarter in school, So I ended up with a degree in painting because otherwise I probably wouldn't have been able to graduate because I wanted to be a graphic designer. Things were a little different back in the 70s. It's not like all those students out there now that actually take graphic design. I didn't have that option, so I'm self-taught essentially.
So we were just showing a whole bunch of your work just before we started. And a lot of it revolves around and you were showing it also as we were getting prepared tonight. So a lot of
that wasn't my work. That was just crap I have sitting around the office here.
It was entertaining nonetheless. So tell us a little bit. I mean, a lot of that revolves around the music world. Tell us how all that started and why that's. Are
you familiar with my work? I mean, have you seen my stuff?
A little bit.
Okay,
yes,
that's the stuff you got on the screen behind you back there,
But we've got
I used to be a corporate designer.
Of people. Okay.
Yeah, I actually tried to be a corporate designer, but they just for some reason didn't trust me. I don't know why, And as time went on, I was trying to do brochures for insurance companies, and I was doing stuff for Boeing and Nordstrom and GTE, and but in the meantime, I was doing all these pieces for my friends who are in the underground scene in Seattle, theater people, music people, writers, photographers, artists, performance people. And these are the people I hung out with. So I basically got into doing the kind of work I do because I worked for my friends. I helped them out. A lot of corporate work supported a lot of that other stuff. That's the way it kind of works. Because artists don't have money. You know how it is.
I saw a quote that you had some time ago that says, I don't produce art, I produce cultural artifacts. So tell us a little bit
That's
of what that means.
boy, that gets into a long rap. I don't
We got
really see
time.
what I
We
do
got
as
time. Go
art.
ahead.
I don't see what I do as art. I don't produce precious objects. I'm not a manufacturing plant that produces precious objects to be sold inside of a dialogue that includes museums and collectors and galleries and other artists. I'm involved with the dialogue of the people. I mean, basically everybody in the whole world understands graphic design, but they don't know they understand graphic design. You know, we all know what yellow means. We all know what a straight line means. We all know what a square versus a circle means. We know these things because we grew up in this culture, and we all read this language, but we don't realize we read this language. So I, being a graphic designer, have come to master that language, and it's my job to work for a client inside of this dialogue to change people's minds. Basically, it's my job to make people think differently about something. It might be buy this product or go to this event or vote for this candidate, but it's my job to use all this language at my beck and call to people's heads and get them to think differently, to participate in something. You know, that's a very different task than what a fine artist does. I mean, if you look at the same kind of spectrum, fine artists are like surgeons and graphic designers are like dentists. The idea that they teach graphic design in an art department always strikes me as the weirdest thing. Because we're really, even though we all dress and look the same as artists and we're working with this visual language that's very similar to what artists do, it's kind of like the way dentists look like doctors, but they're really not. And I sure don't want a dentist working on my brain, and I don't want a brain surgeon working on my teeth, you know? So what
Right,
is
yeah.
my job is to get involved with this visual dialogue, this language that everybody speaks and nobody knows they speak it, and produce these advertising and promotional artifacts just like artists have done before the invention of fine art. I mean, the earliest pieces of creative work known to man were basically functional art. It wasn't muse-driven, it was function-driven. So I produce artifacts that this culture that we live in, which can accurately be described as an industrial merchant culture, I produce the vital artifacts of that culture, the folk art of that culture.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I don't do
So we've
fine
got a lot
art.
of students here. So we've got a lot of students here who are just graduating or have graduated or are about to get out of school. So a lot of them are starting to take some of their first jobs, you know, whether that's with an in-house group for a corporation or if they're at an agency, a big agency, you know, or a small design boutique kind of group. Tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day is like. How do you work? How do you meet your clients? What, you know, how do you actually like keep the ball rolling?
I don't. Any other questions? No, graphic design like I practice. I mean, I used to be a great hustler. I mean, to really be successful in graphic design, you got to be a good salesman. It doesn't matter how good a designer you are. If you can't get that initial project, you're not doing anything at all. And I used to be a great hustler. And I'm an old alcoholic. And when I drank, I was out pushing 24/7. It was a full-time job, just knocking on doors. I'd go to 4 or 5 interviews a day for weeks on end without a break, you know. And you know, through the middle of that, I was able to produce a body of work and a clientele that became reliable. When I quit drinking, I kind of lost that skill. So now I kind of sit around and wait for people to call me. So, you know, I can have anywhere from 30 to 0 projects sitting in front of me at any given time. Who knows, you know? I just kind of just float through it. I really don't have a plan anymore. I used to have a big plan, but I don't anymore. I'm just kind of getting old.
Is that a product of getting older, or do you think it's just absolutely not necessary? And would you advise that, you know, somebody coming out of school, that, you know, don't waste all of this time making this grandiose plan, just get out there and work?
Wow, that isn't what I thought I said. Wow, that's crazy. No, you got to hustle. If you don't go out there and hustle, you're dead in the water. You know, that is more important than knowing what graphic design is to be a salesman. We live in a capitalist society. That's what we do. We hustle. We're a bunch of, you know, salesmen in this culture. That's what the highest order of the day is. What do you think our politicians are? So, I'm in a weird position in that somehow I've developed a name for myself and I'm a known product. I'm doing the same thing I've always done, but graphic design has changed. I'm still doing what I do that I was doing 20 years ago. I don't even use computers in my work. And graphic design has shifted into this technological activity. So the people that hire me now are people who are hiring art chantry as opposed to a graphic designer. Nobody hires me to be a graphic designer, but they try to hire me as the artist art chantry. So weirdly, I've stayed exactly the same doing what I've always done, but I've become an artist because graphic design kind of left and moved over there and left me over here, and now everybody thinks I'm an artist. I don't know. Doesn't make any sense to me, but it's the way it works. So people hire me as an artist now. They want that art chantry look.
You brought up a good
We'll
topic
figure
in
that one
that
out.
design has changed so much because of technology, and a lot of students coming out now might feel that the need to rely upon that technology, or some students stray completely away from it, and are all hands-on. Tell us a little bit about, when all of these computers started coming out. How did it affect your work? Did it affect your work at all? Do you completely stay
Oh
away from
man,
it? All of that.
I I fought switching over because Seattle was a technical hub at that point when the transition started. I mean, Aldus was up here and they developed desktop publishing. A lot of my friends were the ones working at Aldus developing all those type systems. When Adobe came in and bought Aldus, they absorbed it, and all my friends went to work for Adobe. A lot of my old punk rock friends became their type designers, things like that. So it's one of the first things they did was try to switch Seattle designers over to this technological system. So the change happened here very quickly. And I really kind of wasn't interested in that. Strangely, way back in the early 80s when computers first started to move in, I could see right away that this was going to be a real threat to the industry. All that C and D level work, those crappy little brochures for dentists and things that we used to do 25, 30 years ago, that was our bread and butter. That stuff all went away almost immediately. All the services, typesetting, illustration, photography, proofreading, copywriting, all these things went away and were absorbed by the computer. Prepress disappeared. And pretty soon it was going to be a solid technological process, and I could see that coming. And I wanted to be a graphic designer. I didn't want to be a technician. I was a great production artist. I mean, the local prep houses used to use my work as an example of how to do it right. They used to show clients what my stuff looked like. I was that good at it. But all that stuff got left behind. So I had to actually try to position myself very self-consciously. I wanted to continue doing what I loved, which means I had to position myself into the idea market. I had to try to position myself as what I estimated to be that final 10% of the market that was still doing creative work rather than technical work. I was wrong about that. It actually boiled down to about 5% of the market, not 10%. And somehow I was able to actually do this. So now you're talking to me like this instead of talking to, somebody standing next to you. I mean, you have me come on the show, which means I succeeded at trying to do what I tried to do. I was drunk at the time. I don't remember how I did all that. I do remember very self-consciously. In Seattle at the time, when I started out in Seattle, there was nobody that did anything remotely like what I do. I mean, this was like a market that was basically a bunch of hippies and ad guys. There really wasn't anything that looked like what I did. So I had to figure out a way. Nobody would hire me to do what I do. I was already too weird for everybody. So what I ended up doing very self-consciously was going out there and creating a market for myself. I literally went out and did work for free. And I did a lot of teaching. I taught in classes. I taught for 18 years. I brought in assistants. I brought in friends. I basically went about teaching a whole mess of kids. They were all younger than me. Taught my kids, created my own competition. What happened is this whole generation of kids kind of emerged out of this, and a style emerged out of it. And they were all working in this kind of style that was also plugged into the culture that was emerging in Seattle. So it was all happening all in this big mosh. And what happened was all of a sudden, what I did became familiar and viable, and people would actually start to hire me. And for about 6 months there, I was the king of mountain there. I mean, it's like I got all the work in town, and that lasted about 6 months because as people came to Seattle wanting that grunge look and all that kind of thing, they say, well, who do I go to for that grunge look? And they'd all point at, oh, Chantry over there, he's the guy, you know. So they'd all come to me and they'd walk in the door and they'd see this old guy. And they go, we want that young hip look. What are you sending me to this old guy for? And so it was over before it began. My prime earning year lasted 6 months. So I was very successful at creating my own competition. Wiped me out. I even had to move away from Seattle because I couldn't get work here anymore.
One of the things that I want to remind everybody is that we do the one-on-one questions. So we're going to take some live audience questions tonight, starting at about 8:30, 8:45. And if you want to ask a question, I'm going to have you guys line up over here, and we'll take you one by one. I got to limit to 5, okay? So 5, yeah, I know you're in. You ask questions every week. You're good. I appreciate it, though. I do. I appreciate you.
I may not answer them.
But we're also taking...
that in mind.
He may not answer them, so they better be good, or at least be remotely interesting. But we're also taking questions from the live studio. Which, great dental work. That's look at those caps. So moving on. In my copious amounts of studying that I did for this art, I read that your work is exhibited at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Museum of Modern Art.
Yeah, isn't that exciting? Yeah.
The Seattle Art Museum, the Smithsonian, and the Louvre. Is that all true?
Yeah. No, it's all lies. No, actually, that's true. My stuff hangs in museums all over the world, which is always weird because they, you know what museums, fine art museums do with posters? Before they can collect them, they have to make them look. The reason they'll collect posters is because they kind of look big like paintings, you know, and they can understand paintings, right? So what they do is they take your poster and they literally mount it on canvas, and then they can accept it into their collection. So I've got work in the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, the Museum of Modern Art. I've had one-man shows at PS1 MoMA, the Seattle Art Museum. Some of my posters have hung in museums in Europe. One of my ugliest and most repulsive posters actually hung in the Louvre for 2 weeks.
How does that happen? Does the Louvre just call you, hello, this is the Louvre, we'd like to take some of your artwork? Like,
it was a weird thing. I mean, what happened was that the client entered the poster, and it was for the Rocky Horror Show, okay? And they entered this poster in some kind of UNICEF contest. And it made it all the way, it was selected as the most memorable poster of the year 1986 in America. Of course, you remember it, right? Yeah, okay.
I do.
And so as a result, all the most memorable posters from all these countries ended up hanging in the Louvre and a part of a big show for 2 weeks. So my work actually hung in the Louvre, you know. I was up there with Da Vinci, man. And then
so that's a goal.
And
that's
then I'm
goal,
sure
everyone here, young designers, young minds.
I think they tore it down into little pieces afterwards.
That's an interesting thing, though, is because your artwork does sort of start blurring those lines between art on the wall and design and typography and all those skills that we need as designers to be able to communicate and send the messages that we do in whatever style we choose or whatever format we choose. And it's really interesting to see those those interchanges sort of take place. Is that something that, like, when you started out, that you even thought that down the path that could even happen?
Well, no. This is something, when I made my decision to become a conceptual kind of designer, an idea-driven designer, what I ended up doing was stepping closer to the concept of fine art. It became closer to that edge, that break point between fine art and graphic design. I'm right at that edge. I'm right in between graphic design and art. I've always straddled fences in my life, and so I've got one foot in both worlds, and that's very intentional. And I also pit both sides against each other and draw a lot of creative interest off of the friction that it creates. I'll badmouth both sides just to see them get pissed off. I do that kind of stuff all the time. And the idea, like, for instance, my show in the Seattle Art Museum actually so angered the arts community that for instance, the Seattle Art Museum refused to keep any of the posters in my show because they were so angered that my show even happened. Yet it was the most attended show in Seattle's history at that point. You know, so it was like, my work thrives on contradiction, and that's the part that I find really interesting. I really would like my work to survive in this weird way where 100 years from now they can look back at my work and say, hey, that's interesting. I wonder what was going on there, and still be able to get ideas and thoughts and feelings out of the thing. I want my work to survive, and this is a field that's so ephemeral that all the work is basically trash. It's literate. We design landfill. You know, pop cans, beer cans, old posters. It's all garbage essentially. If any of it survives, it's almost like a miracle. And the stuff that ends up in the museums is the rarest of all. And essentially, that if you're trying to design for that particular point, you have to really approach it from this odd perspective. It's not like you make something beautiful and it's going to go into a museum. It has to have some teeth in it. It's got to have some social commentary. It's got to actually mesh with the culture you're trying to deal with. You know?
Tell us a little bit about your day-to-day now, like your environment, even like your physical environment, how you're going about producing your artwork now. I mean, we can see a little bit of your office there. You're telling us you think it's all junk, but you obviously, there's some value in it for you right there.
This is my office. I work in a garbage dump. Look at this. Look at that. It's just this piles of crap everywhere. This is what I work in, you know? Yeah, pretty exciting, huh?
So
what's my everyday...
Yeah.
My approach to work now is that, well, for 35, 40 years, I've been kind of training this muscle, this way of thinking in my head. And so now when I sit down to actually design things, it's just right there waiting. I don't do sketches. Basically, I research the client, and I try to learn as much about them as I can, and that in itself is a huge task. And I love that part because it's so human. You're really involved with this interaction. It's like you're getting to know another universe. Every client's a whole universe, you know, it's totally new stuff. And you have to know it intimately in order to do the project. And that's the fun part. And then I just kind of forget about it. For about 2 weeks, I let it sit in my brain. I work on other stuff. Maybe I go out and mow the lawn. You know, maybe I watch TV. Maybe I read a book. And then I decide, well, the deadline's coming up. I better get to work. And I go sit at the table, and I just sit down, and it pours out. And I'm not kidding. That's the way it works now. I've actually been able to kind of control my subconscious creative process now that I can rely on it utterly. I mean, I'm actually at a point where I'm so frustrated by not having enough clients to throw ideas into that I actually have kind of helped build other people's careers by constantly giving them ideas. I mean, there have been people I've known who literally will call me up with their client and say, well, here's the problem, what do I do? And I'll say, well, do this and this. And they go and do that, and they make all this money, and it's just, and they come back with their next client, you know, it's like, yeah, okay, cool, you know. You know, it's just the way I work now.
I've got a set of questions that I've been using for about, I don't know, 10 episodes now. I think tonight's the last night I'm going to use them. Yeah, they're good, yeah. But I think we need to move on to the next set.
Why don't you ask me what my favorite color is or what kind of car I drive?
You drive a Prius, right? A Gremlin.
Yeah, right. No, I drive an old rusty pickup truck with dents.
I love it.
I can haul stuff in it.
Like your whole office of stuff.
Yeah, you bet. In fact, I'm going to have to move pretty soon. So.
Okay, so the first one has to do with sort of filter is a big word right now. Sort of figuring out there's so much junk thrown at us through media through media and digital and TV and Twitter and all this BS. How do you filter your life? How do you keep out the crap that you don't want to mess with? And how do you bring in the good?
I don't. I like crap.
So you let it all just hit
the
you
more
in the
the
face.
merrier. I mean, this is where our culture is. This is the mesh point. All this crap around us, this garbage that we live in, and this media onslaught. This is all the stew. We live in a mosh. Our minds work in a mosh. And when we impose a grid like a computer or a grid system or Swiss design, you're really just kind of laying a grid over a pile of garbage, you know? This is our idea factory. This is the human existence and the human you get my point, you know? This is where all this stuff comes from, and without it, I'm crippled. I can't work without being surrounded by ideas. Everything I pick up, here's this pencil with good old advertising on it. Here's this toy bomber, you know. Here's a clip art book, you know. This is where my ideas come from. I mean, it's like throwing gasoline into a fire, and then it bursts into flame, and there's your idea.
You just absorb all of it.
So
do you ever
filter?
get to the point where it's too much?
This is my filter, right here. You know, everything in my life filters through me, and that's when you start using words like filter, you're using abstracts for what is human thought.
So it's unhuman to filter and keep things out, and you see that as a bad thing.
No, it's not unhuman, but it's self-defeating. I mean, all right, if there's a world of ideas out there and you don't want to look at it, so you, quote, filter it out, where are you going to get your ideas?
Magic, right? Magic.
Yeah,
we all have this. We all because
yeah.
We're creative. We have this special thing inside of us that just spews beautiful ideas all the time.
Yeah, where do these ideas come from? That's like a hippie hangover concept. You know, that's not
hippie
real.
hangover
it's
talk.
It's never been.
DesignChat is your new name. It's called hippie hangover talk. Everybody.
Well, that kind of everybody is an artist that they only had the time is just ridiculous. You know, it's. Being an artist is as hard a work as digging a ditch.
The next question has to do, it doesn't really apply, because you told me earlier today that you're not really a computer guy, you don't really do much of the digital stuff.
Nope.
The question is, do you have a guilty pleasure website, and what is it? So if it's not a website, is it a newspaper or a magazine or a comic book or something, or like a resale shop that you got to visit every once a week or something like that?
Well, for years I used to love gig posters, just because it was. I really love rock posters and I love posters in general. That's my primary love. Reading gig posters was a chance to mesh with my peers. Even though I was older and more experienced than most of those guys, we were all into the same thing, and I could really interact with them and watch their thinking and see their ideas and even at times, you know, get into conversations with these people and, you know, for better, for worse, because I had a rough time in there. You know, I'm an opinionated guy and nobody likes opinions. So the interaction was oftentimes just this difficult thing. But I became addicted to that site for years. And, you know, after a while, it lost its meaning like most everything you get addicted to. Now I have this Facebook page that every day I sit down. All this junk I was showing you on the screen, you know, like these, you know, toys and stuff. Every day I scan something and I put it on my Facebook page, and then I sit down and write an essay about it. I have no idea what I'm going to write when I sit down. I just sit down and I'm training myself to write spontaneously in that fashion, basically trying to teach my mind to write the way I design at this point. And so far, it seems to be working fairly well. You know, I've always had ideas for books that eventually execute, and this seems to be prepping myself for that process. But that's my guilty pleasure now, is writing on my Facebook page every day about some object, some piece of junk I have laying around my studio. Like, okay,
I'm really glad you brought that up.
This is an old spent fireworks skyrocket I found on the ground about 20 years ago. I think, you know, what I had to do is tomorrow is I had to throw this on the screen and I had to write about it and just see what the hell comes out, just to entertain you. Yeah.
I was going to say earlier, I'm glad you brought that up, because if anybody here is on Facebook, do a search for Art Chantry. What he's doing is really interesting. Not a lot of people are doing this. Instead of starting up a blog and just doing it there, he's operating in a way that people can interact with him right away. Comment systems on blogs can get a little tedious and you got to dig through all this junk all the time. But Facebook is really immediate, and I think he's sort of a pioneer in this way. I'm not sure if you've had any discussions with other people who are doing this the way that you are, or writing as much as you are on Facebook. It's not that common to see a huge blog post on an interesting object like that. So really, I want to applaud you on doing that, and just say keep it up, man, because that is one of the most interesting feeds that's coming through on Facebook for me right now, anyway.
I don't understand why that's so weird. I mean, everybody has been trained to use Facebook to talk about what they ate for breakfast, which is, why did they sell it that way? I mean, it's an instant communication forum. I mean, it is blogging. What is blogging anyway? People keep telling me I should set this up into a blog, and the word's disgusting. What does it mean exactly?
It sounds like a chest cold or some sort of...
yeah, it's like phlegm or something. Hey, look, I got to spit up some phlegm on my blog. Yeah. So no, the reason I don't start a blog is because I have no idea how to do one, and it sounds disgusting. Whereas every day I can sit down on Facebook and just start tapping, and stuff comes out, and it's like people respond to it, and dialogue starts, and I'm able to share this information I've got in my head. I mean, I'm a garbage man. I'm talking about the garbage I got, Garbage might be designed by Alvin Lustig, or it might be a spent firework,
How long have you been doing it now, and what's the most interchange that's happened because of that now?
Well, I don't. I've been doing it for about maybe a couple of months, and interchange, it's always surprising. I find that people tend to respond to the personal story. What happens is, like, if I'm talking about an old friend who died and I'm showing a piece of their work, or it's like there's an old friend of mine, his name is Nathan Gluck, and he used to be like Andy Warhol's graphic designer back when Andy Warhol ran a design studio back in the 50s. And, he was like a good friend of mine. And at one time in my life, he gave me for Christmas, he gave me one of, Eugene Federico's necktie. Yeah, so here's this famous designer's necktie that I got for Christmas with a little note from Nathan. What do you do with something like that? I just kind of kept it around for years and years. And so what it is, I threw it on my scanner and I posted it and told the story of where I got this necktie and what it was, And people really loved that. Look at this thing. Look at this object. What do I do with such a thing? Well, here's the story. This is why I got it. What do I do with it, So, I mean, and that seems to be this kind of thing that people really respond to. And, considering what an electronic and, abstract medium something like Facebook is, the human element is what people are responding to positively, which I think is a beautiful thing. Don't ever tell anybody I use the word beautiful.
We won't publish this anywhere, I promise.
Okay.
So is that object, an art object that holds the 20 years that it's sitting in a dusty box, or does it really translate or sort of elevate into that art object once it's written about and noticed?
Well, I don't use the word art object. I use the word artifact, remember?
Right, sorry. I'll write
I'm doing archaeology here, It's a cultural kind of archaeology, and I'm throwing up cultural ephemera artifacts, and I'm discussing them from all kinds of different angles. It might be my personal experience with it, or it might be what I know about the person or the subculture that created this object. And I think that's what's the most interesting thing to me about graphic design.
The last question from me for tonight is, what's currently on your visual radar? Could be anything on the web, could be anything in your personal life, could be anything outside of your house or your dusty truck or something like that. What's currently on your visual radar? What's piquing your interest right now?
I'm really fascinated by that guy who's designing the New York Times magazine. I get the Times, especially the Sunday edition. There's a designer who's doing this. He's doing the most incredible typography. Who is this person? I'm just looking at it every week, and I just go, wow, this guy's amazing. How come he's not famous, So yeah, that's the person I'm interested in right now. Tomorrow I might be interested in raid cards or old monster cards or trade magazines from the nuclear industry. I don't know. Maybe I'll start collecting waste oil from the Gulf and carrying the different samples around in jars, or I
There's
don't
plenty
know.
of it. Yeah.
Just plenty I'd go to around. Okay, that's maybe dead birds. How does oil-soaked birds? That'd be fun to collect. Somebody's got to do
In
it.
what? I don't even know what to say. What stage of decomposition would you prefer in that?
Advanced.
Advanced. Okay, good.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, let's start taking some audience questions, guys. I don't see a lot of people in line over here. Come on, let's get going. Yeah, see, he's calling you chicken. Everybody.
Yeah, you're all chicken.
Jump on here.
You're all
We'll take the first one here. So just say your name. Go ahead and jump on camera. Say your name and go ahead.
Hi there, I'm Dan Shapiro. My question
Hi,
for you,
Dan.
Art. Hey, my question for you is, we're, as Ryan said before, we're on the cusp of, a digital age in regards to new technology. And in this, you have brought digital collaging, traditional collaging, compositing, whatever you want to call it. Where do you see that belonging in this, next stage of technology?
Well, I mean, it's already happening. We're not on the cusp of anything. We're actually smack dab in the middle of it. We're kind of going through this great big learning curve, and it's such a powerful technology. We're maybe about halfway through that learning curve with this technology. We've got another 10, 20 years before we've actually totally integrated this into our everyday thinking and culture. All that being said, this is about printing. Graphic design is about printing. It's not about computers. It's not about digital technology. Those are just devices that we've created that speak in the language of printing. It's a way of faking printing, but it's still using printing technology and printing. You don't like printing, do you? No. You got to learn.
No,
printing.
I love print.
You're
Are
not
you kidding? I live for print.
And I'm not talking desktop. I'm talking offset printing. I'm not talking silkscreening. I'm not talking letterpress. I'm talking about, giant offset litho presses. That is where 99.9% of the work we do actually gets made. And I see art schools all over I've lectured at art schools all over the world. I've been to the big ones and I've been to the little ones, and I have seen hundreds of programs, and they're really shockingly inadequate. You go to a major design school and they don't teach their students what a printing press even is. Now, that's like teaching somebody how to paint without ever letting them put brush to canvas. That is our medium. Everything we design goes through that process. You may say, no, I do websites, but websites are based on printing technology as well. It's a fake version of doing printing. So I think my best advice to all you students out there is to go work at a print shop for 6 months. Drop out of school right now. There's nothing they're teaching you in school that's worth a crap, really. You go out and you watch a lot of TV and you get a job at a print shop. 6 months, you'll be the best graphic designer in town.
Like that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Round
If you believe that, I got a bridge want to say.
Come on up.
Uh-oh, I recognize you. Do I know you?
Hey, awesome. Yeah, I met you down in Florida, actually. I had a crazy Marvel shirt on. I met you down in Orlando, Florida. And
Orlando's a weird town, man. That's a strange place.
You're telling me. That's why I'm in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you said a lot of interesting stuff that has stuck in my head since I've been developing my own work. Being one certain substance.
That's why you're walking around with death on your shirt.
Yeah, it says not now I'm working as he's talking on his cell phone.
Yeah, okay.
But I was just wondering, like I said, you said many interesting ways of clearing your head right before you go to work on a project to let the ideas flow. And you brought up one specific substance continuously, which was hilarious. I just wanted to say.
Oh, heroin? Awesome. Yeah, I was making heroin jokes. Yeah.
I just had to hear you say it one more time.
No, actually, heroin's just cool, man.
Well, what I'm interested in now is when you, I guess the only word that comes to mind is doodle. When you just mess around, what do you do? I mean, you don't, you mentioned that you don't work on computers, and you kind of cut and paste, you pick things from here and there. So like when you just are just messing around creating on your own, for whatever like might spark your interest, what do you do?
That's an interesting question. What do I do? I used to be a doodler, but that all went away. I spend a lot of time looking. When I build things with my hands that I'm not getting paid for, things I do for pleasure, it's not
Right.
graphic design. I spent this weekend building a stone wall in my yard out of loose pieces of rock that I'd gathered, Uh, I recently built out turned my garage into a studio space, and I'm moving this mess into my garage. I do that kind of stuff now because I'm old. I don't do graphic design for pleasure anymore. One of the things that happens is when you take an advocation and you turn it into a vocation, it becomes a job. And the last thing I want to do when I go home at night is do visual art. I want to do anything but, because I spent the whole day. It's like if you work at McDonald's all day, the last thing you want to do is go home and cook a hamburger. That's
Right.
kind of the way it gets after a while. So I mean,
Right.
I spend
Which
the
is where
things
I think.
yeah, the doodling happens in my head now. That's where my concepting, and it's a process of filling it full of imagery. I do spend a lot of time looking at stuff and pondering it and trying to figure out where it comes from. I spend a lot of time researching the origins of things. I'm really fascinated where this stuff comes from. Like that picture on your t-shirt. Why do we associate death with a skull and a hooded Grim Reaper? Where did the concept of the Grim Reaper come from? Shouldn't this be something we all know? We all know what that image means. Yeah, it's a pretty weird image to mean death, isn't it? So, I mean, that's the
Right.
kind of stuff I'm fascinated by. And I spend a lot of time researching that, And, even like, who was the artist that actually drew that picture? Is that Pushead, or is that an old etching from the 16th century? I mean, what the hell is that? That kind of thing becomes
Right.
interesting. But I spend a lot of time trying to find out the history of things.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, we all expect a report on that image and where it came from. We need you to research it and post it to us at Design Chat on Twitter so we can all share it.
All right. All
Yeah.
right. Well, hope to see you
Look
again.
up the
Thanks.
Black Plague. That's cool.
Real quick, we're going to take a couple questions from the chat room. I just want to remind people in the chat room right now, throw questions up in the chat room. We'll harvest those and serve them back up. So the first one from tonight comes from Garific, who asks, question for Art, has he ever been stymied to come up with an idea on a client project? Have you ever had something that just totally stumped you and you couldn't work on it?
Oh yeah. That will happen your entire career. I mean, there just are times where, for whatever reason, you just can't get your head around the project, and that continues to happen to you periodically. Quite often I fail on projects. I'll try really hard to make the client happy, and I can't. For any reason you can think of. So I mean, it's like failure is part of this job. That's one thing I've learned. Nobody bats 1,000 in this gig. I've got an interesting, or maybe I think it's interesting, a story about the very first professional poster job I had. And this was way back in about 1975. I was still a student in college, and I got my first poster job. And I was so excited. It was a concert poster for some really bad folk artist, and I got the little assignment. I was getting paid, $25 to design this poster. And I went home and I set up my little drawing table with my white piece of paper and all my T-squares and all this stuff. And I sat down and couldn't think a thing. And so I had a couple weeks and I was like trying to come up with ideas, and, that piece of paper stayed blank, and it was it was like 10 o'clock at night, the day before I was supposed to go in at 8 o'clock in the morning to show them my idea, and I was so desperate, I had nothing. It was literally a blank white piece of paper. I had no idea what to do. And I'd gotten to the point where I was actually rehearsing my failure speech, that thing where you walk around and you're saying, oh, I'm just a piece of crap. You should never have given me this job. I'm so sorry. I'm a loser, I was actually practicing that speech, and I thought my career was over as it started. And so I said, well, I need to relax. I need to go to sleep. Maybe I can get up early and work on it. So I took a bath. I took a really hot bath. I had this big bath that was so big in this apartment that I could literally lay down flat and it float, you know. And I was laying there in this bath and just floating. And I was saying, oh, this feels so good. And then my head filled up with ideas. And I was laying there kind of going, oh, yeah, I could do that now. Yeah, okay. And I got up, dried off, got dressed. And I went and did the poster. And, you know, a couple hours later, I was looking at the poster and I was going, where the hell did that come from? You know, how did that happen? Took it to the client the next day. He was thrilled. Everybody was happy. They gave me another project and my career started. But I was confronted with this weird, interesting phenomenon. Why did that hot bath trigger creative concepts? And over the years, I've really spent a lot of time studying that. And I've also read a lot of other creative people, even people like Andy Warhol and famous directors like John Carpenter. They all have this kind of moment of relaxation where they allow the subconscious creative part of the brain, which is not a conscious part of your brain. You don't sit down and do creativity like you would put together a puzzle, you know, putting pieces together. It actually happens in the unconscious part of your brain. The trick is to relax yourself so that that idea kicks forward and comes out your hands. It's like driving a car. When you drive a car, you're not thinking about driving that car. Well, no, I've got to turn left. I've got to grab the wheel and turn it. And then I've got to turn it. I've got to put my foot down. You're not thinking that. You're thinking about what you want for dinner. You're listening to a song on the radio. You're telling off the boss, you know. You're driving beautifully. And this other part of your brain is driving that car. Well, the creative act happens in exactly the same fashion. So what I discovered is that hot bath was a form of distraction. And you can use distraction in a marvelous way. Right now, I like to listen to music while I work because I'm listening to the music. I'm thinking about the music. I'm thinking how it's put together. I tend to listen to records that are things I find in thrift stores, and I play them at random. It can be anything. It could be opera, it could be country western, it could be heavy metal. And I'm listening to it and thinking about it, trying to figure out what they were thinking when they made it. I'm doing anything except thinking about the design I'm doing, and yet it's coming out of my hands. So I highly encourage all those students. Yes, I highly encourage everybody in the room, the next time they're really stuck on an idea and they're on the verge of failure, go do something else. Take a hot bath, you know, go get drunk, you know, maybe just go to sleep. Have a run, you know, watch a football game. Do anything. Listen to music. Do anything to get your mind off the subject, and then suddenly your head will fill with ideas because your brain's working on it. You may not know it, but your brain is working on your idea. You just have to figure out how to get it kick out to your hands.
So let's take another question and distract you real quick. So
okay.
Hop on.
You look familiar too. Hello? Oh.
My name is Greg Oshab, and yeah, that's my name. So I don't think I've ever met you before. I haven't been, but yeah. That's not my question though. So as of last week, I'd never heard of you. I mean, you said that you did a poster that was in the Louvre in 1986. I was born that year, so I did a little research on you, and I thought
I used to be young like you. I used to be skinny. I had hair. Yeah, it's amazing.
You worked for Nirvana and Hole as a salesman. How did you get that job? I mean, did you go to a concert and say, "Hey, here's my poster," you know, or can I do some work for you, or where'd that come from? Did they come to you?
Well, don't forget, I was in Seattle during those years. I never worked for Nirvana. I did work for Hole. But mostly I worked for my friends. And my friend Bruce Pavitt and Jonathan Poneman started a record label called Sub Pop, which was working out of a magazine I was working on called The Rocket. And everybody who did work for all their friends. And at the time, Sub Pop was simply a little crappy record label that basically didn't pay their bills. You did work for them because they were your friends. You got paid nothing. They promised to pay you money, but they never really did. So you just did it because it was Bruce's record label. Now, Nirvana was just this crummy little band that nobody ever dreamed would become a famous band. They were cute little Kurt's band, you know. He used to walk around holding Mudhoney's guitar for them, that kind of thing. These bands were not famous when I worked for them. I don't think I ever got paid more than $100 to do a record cover for these people. You know, this is not the way it works. It's not like I walk in with a portfolio and try to get hired to do, you know, record covers for Elvis. It's basically you're helping your friends get famous. And when they become famous, they leave. And that's the way it ends.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
It's
we're
so
going to
hard
take
talking.
another question from the chat room real quick. From KW Design, what was your worst client project that you just weren't happy with?
There's been lots of projects I've taken my name off. Clients are people, and there are good clients and bad clients, just like there's good people and bad people. And the most difficult clients are, frankly, the ones that are totally dishonest. And those projects always turn out really terrible. Terrible experiences, terrible design, and it's just, you know, you end up having to develop kind of a BS meter. You end up seeing these people coming and you learn to not work for them. But it takes 20 years to develop that. So you're just going to have to go through a lot of bad experiences. You know, but for every bad one, there's 20 great ones. Some of my clients are still my best friends in the whole world.
Does anything spiritual influence your design?
No.
Next question.
Hello, hi Art.
Hi.
My name is Kiyomi, and I just graduated on Saturday, so I have a question. Throughout my school year, we were always working on like projects individually, kind of doing like a one-man show, and you do like all like the art direction and like the design and like writing the copy, and then you submit it and you get your grade. But as like my senior year approached, when I meet up with industry professionals for portfolio reviews and whatnot, they would always emphasize the importance of collaboration, because in the real world, you're not just working as like one designer, unless you're, of course, like Art Chantry, who can run his own show. But I was just curious about your opinion, or if there's any like other artists that you want to collaborate with, or you wish that you were like, stuff, maybe I can do something cool with him. Just out of curiosity.
Well, okay. You know, I really do sincerely think that graphic design is a collaborative art form, like making a movie is a collaborative art form. Every project I work on, I have to work with printers, I have to work with copywriters, photographers. I don't design the type, you know, I use somebody else's type design. I didn't design a computer, I didn't design the pencil, I have to use somebody else's design. This is all collaboration. And every project I have, I've got a client. And they're at least 50% of the project. When you have a good client and you have a real collaboration with that client, that is the most satisfying experience you can have in this business. The idea that you operate like a little private artist following your muse, separate from everything else, is entirely wrong, because that is not the way the world actually works for graphic design.
Art, we just want to thank you. It's okay. It's not your fault. We all are very appreciative of you coming out and spending the time with us tonight. Perfect. Thanks, Art. We'll talk to you soon.